What up, yo? It's Marc Shanup at the Fantasy Knockout Fantasy Football Show. Today is Tuesday, November 1st. You can follow the show on social media at Fantasy Knockout. Make sure to subscribe whatever platform you're watching or listening on, and let's hit that goal of 100 subscribers. I'm excited for today's show. It's the Week 9 must-add players. Who are we looking at this week? What's the flavor of the week for quarterback and defense streaming-wise? First, I got to give a shout-out to a buddy of mine, Jay. I want to say thank you for the support. He reached out to me and said big props to the podcast. He also screenshotted me his team this week, and he replied, no, thank you very much, Mark. I needed this win this week, 3 losses in a row, but finally sat on the waiver wire and listened closely to the show and made the right moves. Thank you, Jay. You're welcome. Glad to help. That's why I do what I do with this. It is just as satisfying to watch you guys succeed as my personal leagues. So please share the show with someone who you think could use the help. Let's talk some news.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here is the news.
News with views. Wide receiver Cooper Kupp from the Rams. His head coach Sean McVay expects Kupp with his ankle to play in Week 9. Kupp injured his ankle in a meaningless garbage time against the 49ers. They believe he didn't suffer any long-term injury, which is good and should be good to go. I kind of want to wait and see how he practices this week to see what the severity of this ankle injury is. Tight end Mark Andrews from Baltimore. His head coach, John Harbaugh, said Andrews' his shoulder injury is not a, quote, major thing. Andrews was questionable with a knee injury heading into the game. He went down with his shoulder injury early in the second quarter. So if Andrews misses time, rookie Isaiah Likely would have probably a top 12 week this next week. Wide receiver Rashad Bateman from Baltimore. His head coach John Harbaugh said Bateman with his foot will be out a few weeks. Originally deemed a tweak, it's not the case. He's kind of been dealing with this foot injury for several weeks now, so bummer that he's out. See if Duvernay is available. Wide receiver Kadarius Toney from the Kansas City Chiefs, newly acquired. His head coach Andy Reid said it will be a gradual process when asked about Toney working into the offense. And then tight end Irv Smith from Minnesota, he suffered a high ankle sprain. We're waiting on an MRI to determine the severity. I'm going to expect him to miss a few weeks there in Minnesota. Main event, players to add for Week 9 waivers. Teams on bye this week. There's several. There's 6 teams on bye, guys. So get ready for some pickups, maybe some drops. The teams on bye, Cleveland, Dallas, Denver, the Giants, the Steelers, and the San Francisco 49ers. So I got these players listed in importance by position. So, obviously the first is the guy you should be the priority. So let's kick it off with quarterbacks. Justin Fields from Chicago. So if you need a quarterback this week, Fields from Chicago, 41% owned. Andy Dalton from the New Orleans Saints, he's about 14% owned. Marcus Mariota from Atlanta, he's about 26% owned. And then PJ Walker from Carolina, 6% owned. I don't love playing any of these guys or picking them up this week, but if you got a bye week, if you didn't make preparations ahead of time, you might be stuck with one of these guys this week. Looking for a tight end. My top guy, he's actually on bye this week, is Greg Dulcich from Denver. He's 42% owned. See if you can pick him up and stash him through the week. If you can't, I get it. Go get Isaiah Likely from Baltimore, 5% owned. Evan Ingram from the Jacksonville Jaguars, 43% owned. And then Logan Thomas, he was probably dropped. He's from Washington. He's about 6% owned. If you're in need of a running back, check to see if these guys are available. They're more higher percent owned right now, but Donta Foreman for Carolina, he had a monster week this past week, 76% owned. See if he's out there still. Khalil Herbert from Chicago, he's about 64% owned. He is the back in Chicago that I would want to own. Tyler Algier from Atlanta, he's about 54% owned. Latavius Murray from Denver, he's on bye again. So no, you can't play him this week, but he's 40% owned. Kenyon Drake from Baltimore, 31% owned. Isaiah Pacheco from Kansas City, about 34% owned. And James Cook from Buffalo, he's about 22% owned. If you're in need of a wide receiver, Rondale Moore from Arizona, he's the guy I would go get, spend some priority on, some fab on. He's about 35% owned. Joshua Palmer from the Chargers, he's about 26% owned. With Mike Williams going to be missing and Keenan Allen still not practicing, Palmer could be in line for a big workload. Garrett Wilson from the Jets, he's about 48% owned. Kadarius Toney, he's more of a stash right now from the Chiefs. He's 58% owned. Romeo Doubs, he got his touchdown this week from Green Bay. He's about 47% owned. Devin Duvernay from the Ravens, he's about 53% owned. And then Van Jefferson from the Rams, he's about 23% owned. All right, so since we just talked about some guys to add, let's talk about some guys that you can let go. So if you're holding on to like Mark Ingram or Rex Burkhead or J.D. McKissick, those running backs, feel free to let those guys go. Zay Jones from Jacksonville, Julio Jones, Elijah Moore. If you got those guys on your bench, let them go. Pick somebody else up instead. If you got Mike Gesicki, your tight end, let him go. Find a different one. Some streaming quarterbacks this week. Not pretty. Jared Goff from Detroit. He's got Green Bay, which isn't the best matchup, but he's about 53% owned. He kind of got back on track somewhat this past week. He needs another shootout in order to be fantasy relevant. We hope that that's the case. And then Marcus Mariota from Atlanta. He's got the Chargers this week, 26% owned. It's ugly. It's hard to trust. But when he gets more than 20 pass attempts in a game, he tends to have a decent week. And then some streaming defenses. The Kansas City Chiefs, they have the Tennessee Titans this week. They're 29% owned. The last 3 games, they got 8 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and they get a rookie quarterback or a banged-up Tannehill. So I like Kansas City this week, and they're coming off bye, so they should be highly available. Then the Miami Dolphins, they're at Chicago. They're about 43% owned. The last 3 games, they got 6 sacks and 3 interceptions. Start your defenses, or stream your defenses against Chicago. They just don't do that great. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today. The next show is the Week 9 must-start players. Thank you for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe whatever platform you're on. Please leave that rating and review. All right, till next time, see ya.